Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well. Wanted you to meet the third member of our tractor family, pride of the fleet, so to speak. The old Farmall Super A, or in this case, should I say Super A1, 1954. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Some of you guys, probably my age or older, have heard of a Super A1. Some of you guys that are not so familiar with Farmalls, maybe not. Didn't even really know there was such a thing as a Super A1. Had this tractor for years, and I thought we just had a Super A. Never knew. My late brother and I got this tractor back in we're not the original owners. We bought it back in the mid to late 90s. It's a 1954 model, so some of the last year that the Super A was produced. So we bought it from an elderly gentleman that was the original owner. It's not the original paint job. It has had a new paint job, but it runs great. And in my mind, is the ultimate garden tractor. So that's when I thought this was a good time to do this video, since we just got started in the garden. And any tractor like this style where it's offset, where you sit and you can see in front of you what you're plowing. The Farmall A's, the Cubs, the 100s, all of those style tractors, and there were some other manufacturers that made some of these too. In my mind, it makes the perfect garden tractor. I think originally back in the day, these tractors sold for about $1,400. You'd be lucky to find one for $1,400 today. It probably wouldn't run. I've seen them $2,000, $2,500, up to $6,000, depending on the condition and what equipment it may come with it. But anyway, we'll get in close here. Like I said, I think the Super A was made from maybe 47 to 54 range, and this one was in the last year they made the Super A's. So we'll talk about, there's 7 or 8 things that I have come to realize that this is a Super A1, and I've done research by watching other YouTube videos. And there's a couple, if you Google it, Super A1, you'll see that there are a couple of YouTube videos and stuff out there about Super A1s. And there's some of the things, there are no markings on the tractor, like the Super A emblem here. It doesn't say Super A1. And in the literature I've read, that there were no markings. It seemed that between the time frame that they were phasing out the Super A and then the Farmall 100 was next, that they had a period there. I don't know if they didn't have the 100 ready and they ran out of all the Super A parts. It seemed that they took some of the Super C parts and put on those last Super A's. From what I read, like maybe from July to November was the time frame that these Super A1s were produced. So it's a fairly rare tractor from what I've read. Somewhere between 15 and 1600 is all they produced, versus the Super A, there was about 107,000 of those made. And back in the day when I was growing up on the farm, everybody around the small farms had a Super A. It seemed like every neighbor, everybody that we were involved in had a Super A. And for whatever reason, in the stuff that I've read and seen the videos, it's a lot of these Super A1s were found in tobacco territory, eastern United States, which, right here we're dead in the middle of, tobacco country, eastern North Carolina. So anyway, we'll get in close here and talk about some of the things that based on research, I'm saying that this is a Super A1, and then we'll fire up and show you a little video that we did in the garden just a week or two ago. Anyway, let's take a look. Okay, coming in close here. Let me get my drink of choice out of the way. The good old sun drop. Don't know if y'all have any heard of that, but all right. Anyway, looking in close to the operator station here. I do not think this is, or I'm positive, this is not the original seat cushion. I don't think it probably had a seat cushion. A lot of these tractors back in those days, it was just a pan. I think this was something that was added. So, of course, no back. So can you imagine sitting in that sucker for 10 hours a day? The old back would probably be a bit tired. But anyway, it gives you a little cushion now. I don't have to sit in there too long these days, but anyway, one of the things to point out right here that in my research, as I say, looking at some YouTube videos and stuff, this has a 17-inch steering wheel. The standard Super A had a 15-inch. So that was pointed out in those videos as one of the things that a Super A1 had. So coming on down here, here's your throttle right here. Just a simple manual lever with little teeth there to position it. No foot pedal on these bad boys. Here was your gear, manual gears. You had 4 forward gears and reverse. Down here was your light switch, dim, bright, and off. You had a little fuse here for that. Your DC, show if your battery was charging. And then here's your push-pull ignition. You had to pull that out to be able to start it, push it in, cut it off. Right here was your touch control. And right behind it, I'm not sure how good you can see that, you had a touch control temperature gauge. That was actually the temperature of the hydraulic fluid. I guess if it started to run hot or whatever, you would know it there. I did replace that. That had, that's an aftermarket when I ordered, that had broken and didn't work at all. So the touch control on this, or the hydraulics, was a very important thing. The model before this, the Farmall A, had a manual lift system. You had a big lever that you pull the handle and move it forward or backward to raise the plows up and down. So coming out with the touch control was a great improvement back in those days to give you some hydraulics. We all know what a role hydraulics plays on tractors today, but this is one of the first Farmalls, anyway, Super A series, that had the touch control hydraulics. So anyway, and then of course down here, below the operator seat, you got your clutch on the far left, and then you got your left and right brake pedals. And you did have a little thing there. You could lock them together if you wanted to use both pedals, both wheels locked together. But one of the things I was pointing out, why I think it's such a great garden tractor, Spencer, I don't know if you can get a shot here, like if you're almost as if you were sitting in the operator's seat. You can see the plows down below. So whatever you're plowing, your garden or whatever your crop is, you actually can put eyes on it. A lot of stuff nowadays, the plows are on the rear, so you're looking at the crop after it's behind you, but this allowed you to see what up front and give you a bird's eye view of what was going on with the plants, trying not to hit them or whatever as you were plowing. Right here, this is your start. You just pull that bad boy, and this was your choke over here. So you turned your switch on and you pulled this out. No safeties on this bad boy. If you got it in gear and you don't have your clutch pressed, it'll try to start, and actually I have seen them would actually start with it in gear. So you got to be careful of that. I did replace the battery box, was kind of rusted out, so I did fabricate a little wooden box to go around the battery there just to keep it enclosed. So moving on around to this side here, this is a fiberglass fertilizer hopper. I don't use that a lot, but you can throw your bag of fertilizer in there, and there's a series of chains and cogs that connect to a cog on the rear wheel, and they engage as you let the lift down. That will actually make this thing rotate, turn the little wheel in the hopper, and then allow your fertilizer to flow down through the tube, right in the ground right next to your plant. So it makes a pretty good little setup there. Another thing to point out with this Super A1 that we're talking about, you see how there's a gap between the gas tank and then this was the hydraulic reservoir here. That was another thing. I think they used the gas tank off of the Super C. So it had a little bit different mounting and a different, I think the Super A's, there was no gap there. So that was one other thing that was pointed out as a difference on the Super A1. Another thing, I'm not sure how good you can see this, Spencer. Right here, you had an oil pressure gauge right there. Here's the oil filter under this cover, and then you actually have a dipstick. The original Super A's, I don't think, had a dipstick. It's not the easiest thing to get to, I can tell you that. But anyway, there is a dipstick for the oil. I'll show you when we get to the other side how the original Super A's, how you check the oil. And oh, by the way, this Super A1 has a C123 engine. versus the Super A's had a C113 engine. So it has a little bit bigger engine. There again, it may have been the engine out of the Super C. I'm not sure about that. Feel free to put anything in the comments you know about these. But I think this, originally the Super A's had about 13, 16 horsepower or something in that range, and this may have bumped it up to around 20 with the bigger engine. One of the things that has been modified, not the original headlights here. This would not have been plastic. It would have been metal. I'll show you on the other side. This tractor has been converted over to a 12-volt system. It was originally a 6-volt. So, of course, you had to change out the lights. The original ones were 6-volt, 12-volt now. A lot of these, older tractors like this, I think, they offer kits that you can buy online to convert them over from 12 to 6. Or, excuse me, from 6 to 12. The steering box here, it did leak quite a bit. I was putting the 80, 90 weight gear oil. It was leaking pretty bad. I ended up, since I don't use the tractor a lot, I just put a couple grease fittings in there and I filled it with grease. If you used it every day or whatever, that might be a problem. But I've heard of people doing the same thing on gearboxes on rotary cutters and stuff. But as I say, as I read, you see, these were stickers that were put on there when it had a new paint job. There's nothing that designates it. One thing back here, I'm not sure if you can get this in the video, Spencer. On the casting, on the side of the frame here, I don't know if you can read that number, but there's a Z right at the end of it. And that was one of the other things that was pointed out. If it had the letter Z in the castings, then that was another mark that it was a Super A1. So get that in the right light, you can see it pretty good. There's another one right here, if you can see in between those two pipes right there with the Z. So like I said, there was about 7 or 8 things that I watched on these videos that matched up. The other thing right around front here on the grill, you see how there's a large gap right here from this last slot. With the Super A, it was about half of that. It was a much smaller gap. Now, that was another thing that was pointed out, I think, because it had a Super C grill on it. It's almost like when like I said, when they transitioned, they ran out of parts before they got the Farmall 100 ready. So they threw some parts from other tractors on the Super A and called it a Super A1. If you go on tractordata.com, you'll see that they do list a Super A1. Okay, coming on around to the other side here. Here's the alternator. Like I said, that was changed out. It used to be a generator sitting in this spot. So an alternator was added, when it was converted over to 12 volt. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see this, but right down here, where that pulley and that belt is the water pump. And that's what first, about 3 years ago, that water pump had a little bit of leak and it got worse, and finally it got to the point where I said I got to replace this thing. So when I went online to order a water pump, and I was looking at different options and started looking into some forums and stuff, and I was reading some information about a Super A does not have a water pump. It has a different method. I'm not sure exactly how, but it has a different method of cooling. And I'm like, well, what are they talking about? I got a Super A right here and it has a water pump. I'm not crazy. So anyway, that's when I first came across that it may be a Super A1 if it had a water pump. And so sure enough, as my research has I think pointed out, that's another proving factor that this was a Super A1 with this C123 engine. It did have a water pump. That was not an easy thing to change, trust me. A couple years ago, I did purchase a new carburetor. That is actually a Zenith carburetor. It originally had a Zenith, but it leaked quite bad, and it backfired and spit and sputtered, and so I just finally broke down and ordered a new one. I sent the old one back, and they actually allow you a core fee to send the old one back. I think that carburetor was like $300, but I think they allowed you back maybe $75 for sending the old one back. You got your oil bath air cleaner right here. And then right down here, you see you got 2 plugs. So on the original Super A's, this is how you check the oil level. This was a lower plug, just basically just like you would do on a gearbox on a rotary cutter. So you would take this plug out, and if oil runs out, then you're at the low mark, and then this was the high mark. So you take this plug out, and then you add some oil, and if oil ran out of this one, you're at the high mark. So that's how you check the oil back in the day. So I would imagine that this oil pan was off of a Super A, but then again, as I read and saw in the videos, if it had the dipstick, that was a feature that was added on the C123 engine. So then you could, so I guess this has both. But anyway, and so you see this is the arm here for the hydraulics that lift the, when it goes right into the touch control hydraulic box here, and as you move your lever, that would, we'll show it in action in a minute, that would operate the front and rear cultivators. You can see this tractor, all these tires are loaded with fluid. I suspect it's probably antifreeze. That's what they put back in the day. The rear wheels here do have the weights, so it is quite a heavy tractor for its size. Of course, it runs off gasoline. I do run the non-ethanol gasoline in it. I think that just works better. You don't have to worry about the I do it in all of my smaller engines, worry about getting gummed up, or I don't know. I think that ethanol gas sometimes is just not really good on small engines and stuff. So I do run that. Don't have to worry about any regens here, nothing like that. In fact, I don't know that you'll find anything on here other than these aftermarket headlights that's actually like plastic. Back in those days, it was built to last, and being 69 years old now, thing still runs like a top. All right, moving on around to the back. So here are your rear cultivators. This did have a PTO shaft, which is a lever right here. You engage that. So you could run a PTO implement off of here. This did not have the quick hitch that you see on some of the Super A's. Now this contraption right here I added. You'll see that in action when we show some of the gardening video. It's just we don't use this to actually plant a lot of our garden with. I have a planter that goes with it, but the planters don't do well if you only put a small amount of seeds in them. So to keep from having to buy a lot of seeds, we'll take the tractor, the Farmall, and make our rows. And this is just a row marker to this. As you drop it, this wheel goes down and rolls, and this marks the center of the row. We have one of the little push planters that we'll come back and plant with, or either we'll plant some things by hand that we don't have a lot. That's just something I came up with. You got 2 set screws right there that you can take it in and out, and so basically it's just a row marker. So anyway, right under there you had an onboard toolbox under the seat there that you could store a few tools. Other than that, I think that covers most everything. Let's see if we can actually get her fired up here. All right, let's see if we can get her fired up here. Got about half of that laid out, so we'll see. We'll start planting and see where we come to. But there you can see the rows with the little center line markers, so we know right where to run the push plow, or the push planter rather. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you enjoyed that. Man, I just love some old tractors. I tell you, this is like I said in the beginning, kind of like the pride of the fleet. You know, to me, the older the better. It's just amazing how they built things back in those days to last. And here we are, nearly 70 years later, and this thing's still just kicking right along. But anyway, and that reminds me, if you haven't gone there, there is a place in Virginia, just south of Richmond, right off of Interstate 95, Keystone Truck and Tractor Museum. We went there back in January. I would highly recommend, if you get a chance to stop in over there, you should check it out. It's like 100,000 square foot building with tractors from the early 1900s up to, I don't know, probably the 70s or so. Every make and model you can think of. It is very impressive. You can spend the day there. It's like $10 to get in. So I would highly recommend, if you're into old tractors, check that out. And there's some videos online, but they don't do it justice from actually being there, seeing it. But anyway, I reckon we're, you know, we may get some more footage of this later on as the garden starts growing a little bit, and you know, we do some plowing out there or whatever. But anyway, I guess for now we'll put her back under the shed, and we'll catch you on the next one.